أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Greetings and welcome to UK Islamic Mission Sisters Ramadan 2024 series, an enlightening online platform dedicated to our theme of Together for Change. Throughout this session, we'll delve into the essence of cooperation in righteousness and God consciousness. I'm thrilled to have you join us today. I'm Rim Chakraborty, your host for this session. As a revert and the National Secretary for the Sisters New Muslim Care Department at the UK Islamic Mission, I've dedicated several years to serving our community. My base is at Masjid Ibrahim branch in the South Zone. Before we begin, let's address a few housekeeping rules. Please ensure your mics are muted and your videos are turned off. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat box and we'll address them during the question and answer session. Now we'll commence with a Quran recitation by Sister Haneen Ahmed. She will be reciting Surah As-Shams, for which the English translation is already displayed on the slide.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها.
Jazakallah khair. Sister Haneen, mashallah, tabarakallah, that recitation was beautiful. Inshallah, let us begin. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Prior to commencing today's program, I'd like to present an overview of the central theme for this year's UK Islamic Mission Ramadan. Our emphasis lies on وَكُنْتُمْ أَمْوَاتًا فَأَحْيَاكُمْ, and you were lifeless and he gave you life. The verse, and you were lifeless and he gave you life, for the Quran captures a profound concept within the Islamic spirituality. Today, united in our pursuit of positive change, we recognize the power of faith in guiding our journey through Iman. We find hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's transformative influence, as evident in the Quran's rejuvenating message. In a secular and individualistic world, let's awaken our collective conscience to address modern challenges. At this moral crossroads, cooperation is key to progress. Our sessions aim to explore insights from our esteemed speaker on unlocking the path to change. Please allow me to introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Batul Hussain Wali, who is a UK Islamic Mission member for several years. She is from Cardiff branch, Midland Zone, and is working for Sisters Tarbiyah National Secretary. Mashallah, a very accomplished sister who is a medical doctor by profession and has done MBBS from Queen Mary's University of London. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from her. Yes, so Dr. Batul, the floor is all yours.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Rim. Inshallah, I'll just share my screen. And let's get this up into full screen mode. Okay, excellent. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Again, I'm very pleased to be here again today to present Gobbling Up Progress. So as Sister Rim has kindly done, we're reorientating ourselves. Our main theme for this year is وَكُنْتُمْ أَمْوَاتًا فَأَحْيَاكُمْ. And really, the reason this was chosen is because it gives us hope. There's hope that we can go from lifelessness to life. And inshallah, today we are doing Together for Change, which is our national English session. And in particular, we are just completing, alhamdulillah, today, week 1, which is personal development. And really what we've done throughout the week just to orientate you and bring you up to speed, and so that inshallah we can make this a positive and life-changing session, inshallah. First, we looked at the lost arts of reflection. So we identified what are our weaknesses. And then we looked at practicing or performing Muslim. So what does it mean to be a practicing Muslim in the West in particular? Because a lot of us develop a sort of personality complex living in the West. We're so busy trying to fit in, we forget what we have to give back. And we're so busy performing for others, it begins to compromise our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then yesterday's session was about dream big, du'as even bigger. This is looking at the, particularly looking at Surah Maryam as an inspiration to do better. But this is the month of practical goals, not just I'm on a spiritual journey. This is a month of change. This is a month of setting ourselves targets of saying to ourselves, yes, I want to wear hijab. Yes, I want to pray salah. Yes, I want to read my nawafil. Yes, I want to pray tahajjud. Yes, I want to do this, and this. It's about setting practical, real goals. And so, inshallah, we're reaching the end of Personal Development Week, and we have reflected. We reflected upon ourselves. We've acknowledged the importance of taqwa. We have made lofty dreams and du'as. So that leads us up to today's session. And the real question of today's session is, what gives? Why aren't we improving? We know all of these things. What is holding us back? So inshallah, it's going to be quite an intense session. You'll see as we go forward, but it's in the name of improving. It's so that we can improve, inshallah. So to begin with, I want to put forth a scenario to everyone here today. It's very straightforward, so I expect lots of responses in the chat, but it's just so that we have something that we can build on. I want you to imagine one student. They are studying all the time they're studying. They wake up early, they've got a study routine, they have a little planner, you know, they're not really going out seeing their friends as much, they're studying quite a lot. And you have another student who hasn't changed anything about their life. So basically they're sleeping all the time, they're meeting their friends, they haven't really picked up a book all year. One of them passes the exam and one of them fails. It's a very simple question. Who do you think passes? Which one would pass? You got one that's studying and one that's basically sleeping all the time. Do you think it's student A or student B? Pop your answers in the chat. I know it's quite basic, and inshallah, we're going to build on this. So the one studying, exactly. Common sense, right? Why would they pass? Let's take it a step up. Why do you think that student would pass? Why do you think student 1 is going to pass? Because hard work and perseverance. Jazakallah khair, sister. Because they put in the efforts. They put in the hard work, like you said, and they persevered. And it's a very simple concept, but it's amazing. We're going to unpack this today. Actions have consequences. You know, everything you do has a consequence. Everything you don't do has a consequence. Now, this is a really straightforward scenario. You've got one person studying, they're going to pass, one person isn't, they're going to fail. Very, very basic. But not everything in life is that black and white. Sometimes there are things in between, and things can get a little bit confusing. I want you to, we'll park that idea there. So actions have consequences, and we're going to come back to that, inshallah. I want you to imagine another scenario. Again, very, very straightforward, but you'll see why we're doing this in a little bit, inshallah. You come home from work, or you were out, I don't know, visiting family. You come home and there's a package in front of the front door and it's got your name on it. It's addressed to you. What would you do? What would you naturally do? If you come home and you see a package, it's addressed to you, it's in front of your front door, what are you going to do? It's not a trick question. You'd open it up. Very good. You'd open it. Yes, exactly, because it's for you. So you'd pick it up and you take it inside and you'd open it because it's your parcel. Right? Everyone's in agreement. Alhamdulillah. I want you to imagine this now. You come home, same situation. You've come home for a hard day's work or from visiting someone. You come back to your house and there is a boulder twice the size of you in front of your front door. What are you going to do? There's a huge rock in front of your front door. It's a tricky one, isn't it? You might try to move it. Yeah, very good. You might try to move it away. I feel like if the boulder was big enough, I think many of us probably wouldn't even bother, like, even push it, because you know that it's so huge that, you know, you'd make an attempt to move it, but you're not really going to exert your whole efforts, because you know you're not going to be able to move this boulder. Okay, let's bring it all together. What are all these scenarios about? We said that actions have outcomes, they have consequences. We're going to have to ask some uncomfortable questions today, sisters, because this is about personal development. Do we really believe that actions have outcomes? Because when something bad happens to us, how often do we take accountability? Or how often do we say, why did this happen to me? You know, I can't believe my husband is doing this. I can't believe my children are behaving like this. Why is praying so hard to me? Why is it so difficult to wake up for Fajr? Why is my workplace so unsupportive of my hijab? Why this? Why that? Why me? All the time, why me? You know, sadly, we have this mindset, particularly when it comes to children, like, oh, how did this happen? Why are my children like this? Why is my life like this? Why this? Why that? And we look at an outcome, for example, if we think, okay, I can't get a job, I can't get married, my friends aren't inviting me out as much, my children are disobedient, whatever you want to take it to be, whatever negative aspect of life, and we make a whole story behind why this is happening. The only thing in common is that we treat it like something we are powerless to change. We just think that these things randomly happen to us, that, you know, our children are just, you know, randomly we got chosen and we have children who are not obedient, or randomly we're in this situation that's difficult for us, or we treat it as though it's pure chance, and then we act like we have nothing in us to be able to change it. And that is the complete opposite of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us in the Quran. We see it in Surah Ash-Shura. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أصابكم من مصيبة فبما كسبت أيديكم ويعفو عن كثير. And whatever strikes you of disaster, it is for you what your hands have earned, but He pardons much. The issue is, sisters, when we look at our lives and we treat it as something that isn't caused by us, we treat it completely randomly, we won't try to change it. It's just like that boulder in front of your door. You know, if you already have the mindset that you're not going to be able to move it, you're not going to bother. If we go into life with this mindset that this is just my life and terrible things happen to me, you're not going to be able to improve it. And I want to talk about this mindset issue a little bit more and a little bit more detail, because it's very, very important that we understand how our brains are processing the world, because that's the only way that we can change it. And you will see throughout this week, there has been this running theme that we're talking about personal development, but we keep coming back to mindsets, because most of it is in the mind. The actions, all of this follow from when we get our minds in the right space. So, has anyone ever heard of victim mentality? Does anyone know what it is? Does anyone know what victim mentality is? You can pop your answers in the chat box. So, always complaining. So, yeah, it's this idea of why me? You're moaning, you're complaining, you're thinking, why is this happening to me? You feel like you're a victim. You feel like the whole world is against you. Very good. You always think someone else is to blame. Excellent. Yes, exactly this. There's a step forward from that, and it's very interesting. It's called victim sensitivity. So I want to just explain what that is a little bit, and you'll see why it's important for us, religiously speaking, as well. This is victim sensitivity, is this idea that you want to trust other people, but you can't because they've treated you badly in the past. And so because of that, in your relationships, you become more suspicious of people. And you become more, what they say is you become more sensitive to perceived negativity, which I'll give you an example to make it a little bit easier to understand. Say you have a friend, very close friend, but she's always late to everything. Whenever you ask her to go out, she's always late. And so you have, this is the bad experience that you have with her, that she's always late to things. Then your changed behavior is that you've stopped asking her out to places. So she's always late, and then you become more sensitive and you notice things that she says. You know, if she says something to you like, oh, I was so busy today, you already know that she's going to be late in the evening for whatever you planned. And so you change your behavior and you don't invite her out as much and you don't go out with her as much. But deep down inside, in your heart, you want to have a relationship with her, but you can't because of these bad experiences. The reason, so essentially, what victim sensitivity is that you want something, but you're avoiding it because of a bad experience. You want to have a good relationship with your friend, but you're avoiding her because you're so fed up of her always being late because of that bad experience. What has this got to do with us in the month of Ramadan? We experience this on a religious level, sisters. And the way that we experience this is, have you ever spoken to someone who said, you know, I tried going to that masjid down my road, but you know what, all the aunties were horrible and they were so judgmental, I'm never going back? Or have you ever experienced it yourself? You know, I wanted to start wearing hijab, you know, I wore it when I was young, but I really didn't like it at the time. So, you know, I'm never going to wear it again. I didn't like it when I wore it when I was younger. And that's what victim sensitivity does to us, religiously speaking. We start taking our bad previous experiences and we let them hold us back from moving forward. And we have something, this thing called sensitivity. This is being over aware and hyper aware of things around you. So sometimes you go to do something good, like you might start wearing hijab, and you think in your mind that everyone else is staring at you, even though that's not the reality. So this is a mindset issue. This is a mindset issue. Our brains become wired like this. If we take our bad experiences and we don't forgive and let go, if we carry it with us, it holds us back. And so we live in this very uncomfortable space called, it's like a mental dissonance. We want something, but we won't let ourselves have it. We want to be better. We want to be better Muslims. We want to do more. We want to be amongst the righteous, but we won't let ourselves do it. And we won't let ourselves do it because of previous bad experiences. So this Ramadan, we need to let go of all of that, inshallah. And this victim mentality that we were speaking about earlier, this is about being sort of anxious around other people, there's one thing that you often hear people say, like, what will other people say? What will other people think? And we put ourselves down and we blame others. Very common, blaming others for the way that our children turned out, or blaming others for the things that are happening in our homes. This is all part of this victim mindset, and it's not befitting of a believer. And if you want to overcome this, if you recognize yourself in the things that I'm saying, if you want to overcome this, there is a verse of the Quran that can help us overcome this, inshallah. It is a verse in Surah Baqarah. ومن الناس من يتخذ من دون الله أندادا يحبونهم كحب الله والذين آمنوا أشد حبا لله. Still, there are some who take others as Allah's equal. They love them as they should love Allah, but the true believers love Allah even more. The reason this will help you come out of that kind of mentality is we need to detach from the people. We need to detach from what the people think, and we need to love Allah. We need to reattach to Allah. It's like that verse in Ali Imran. قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. Say, O Allah, owner of sovereignty, you give the sovereignty to whom you will, and you take sovereignty away from whom you will. You honor who you will, and you humble whom you will. And in your hand is all good. Indeed, you are over all things competent. What does this teach us? That the people cannot harm us or benefit us, so we need to stop blaming them for our issues. We need to stop blaming them for our issues. We need to take accountability. I've got a quote of Abu Darda, may Allah be pleased with him, on the screen. Essentially, he says, O son of Adam, be concerned about yourself. Because if you start pursuing what you see in other people, your grief will be prolonged and it will not heal your anger. When we start getting obsessed with other people, it won't make us feel any better. We need to reattach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And taking that a step further, we realize that it is on us to make this change. It's nobody else's fault. It's on us to put in the hard work. The important things in life, anything worth having, like we were talking earlier about the student and the studying, anything worth having requires patience and hard work and self-control. And do you know what an excellent example of this? Fasting. Fasting, the month of Ramadan. The amount of discipline it takes to, food that's normally halal during the day, you can't eat it in Ramadan. You have to be disciplined. And in return, in fact, sisters, let me ask you, in return for fasting, why do we fast? What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us in the Quran? What is the purpose of fasting? What are we trying to achieve? You can pop it in the chat box. It's a very, very well-known verse in Surah Baqarah. What is the purpose of fasting? What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? That He prescribed fasting upon us as He prescribed it on those before us, so that you may obtain taqwa. Exactly that. I want you to think about this, sisters. The power of self-control is that it leads to taqwa. That's how important discipline is. The route to becoming God conscious, the route that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for us was fasting. The route Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for us was something that required a lot of self-discipline and self-restraint. So it's on us now. We acknowledge what we want, and we have to put it to one side and focus on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And that comes in various forms. So we discussed one of them already. One of them is, I'm hungry, but I'm not going to eat, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told me not to eat. And you can extend that out to various things, you know. For example, you know, in terms of, you know, relationships that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. I have certain feelings, but I'm not going to act on them because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden that for me. But this is the interesting thing, sisters. Sometimes what we want is not technically bad. The same way that halal food is not technically bad, but we don't eat it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us not to in the month of Ramadan during the daylight hours, right? Let me give you an example. And this has become more and more common nowadays. Sometimes we want to go on a 7-day retreat abroad, a spiritual retreat, to recenter ourselves and to do all of this, and we'll spend months finding the package and we'll go and do that because that's what we want to do. But meanwhile, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to pray and to wear hijab and not to put on makeup when we go outside. Again, this is what I'm saying. Sometimes what we want is not technically bad. There's not technically anything wrong with going on a spiritual retreat. But the issue is about aligning things. Sometimes we want to join a class to teach us archery because it's sunnah. But actually what we need to be doing in that moment is giving time to our children. Sometimes the things that we want are not technically bad. That's why when we reevaluate ourselves, we have to look very, very closely. Because sometimes, you know, a lot of the times we think, well, I'm not doing haram, but actually that's good. Alhamdulillah, you're not doing haram. But a lot of the times our priorities are all over the place. Let me ask a question, sisters. Actually, this is actually quite interesting. In university, a student at university in 1 year, how many hours do you think they spend studying? So that's everything, all the lectures, all the time they spend afterwards, roughly speaking. Is it in the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, a ballpark figure? How many hours do you think that one student spends studying in 1 year of university? Do we think it's more than 100? It must be more than 100, right? Let me tell you, it's around 1,200 hours in 1 year. For all of you who have young children or maybe grandchildren or can still remember back in the day, you know, when your own children were young, I want you to imagine what it was like when they were, you know, you put on that little pinafore and maybe like a straw hat and you sent them off to preschool. And you send them, you know, every morning. Young children are so difficult to wake up and to feed them and to get them dressed. And you keep sending them to school, sending them to school, sending them to school. You never say to your child that, you know, this is too long and too much effort, just give it up. It's fine. And the reason why is because we believe when it comes to academics, when it comes to getting degrees, when it comes to these things, we believe it's important. We believe it's important and we give it its due respect and its due value. And we would never ever tell our child, oh, it's fine, just leave it. When our 13-year-old throws a strop and doesn't want to go to school, we don't say, oh yeah, it's fine. We never say that because we value and we understand its importance. But for some reason, when it comes to deen, when it comes to religion, as soon as things get tough, we want to stop. And as soon as things get challenging for us or for our children, for whoever, we feel inclined to stop. With academia, we recognize that it's important and it's tough and that's just the way it is. But for some reason, with religion, we think it shouldn't be that way. Who said that? We have a beautiful hadith. It starts off describing the nature of Jannah, firstly. And then afterwards, it describes the nature of the hellfire. It's up on the screen. You can read it for yourselves. But essentially, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the angel Jibreel to go to the hellfire. And when he goes and he comes back, he says that no one who's going to hear of this place will enter it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts layers around it, surrounds it by layers and surrounds it by desires. And then the angel Jibreel goes, looks at it, comes back, and he says, by your might, I fear that no one will escape it. What do we learn from this? We learn that the hellfire is surrounded by desires. it's surrounded by desires, it's surrounded by wants, it's surrounded by our wishes. And so that is why it becomes incredibly important, sisters, to differentiate between what our desires are and what our needs are, and moreover, more so important to that, what our priorities are. You know, when we spoke at the beginning about those two students, the first student prioritized their studies over their social life, and they passed the exam. It's simple. You know, one thing leads to another. Actions have consequences. But not everything in life is that straightforward, that you just study and you pass. I know that there are more complicated situations. That's why I think it's worth maybe chatting through one or two examples together, just so that we can broaden our minds and think about things a little bit more holistically. So I'm going to give you a scenario, and the question I'm going to ask at the end is, what do you think she should do? Okay? So the scenario is, we have a sister. She has two young children. One is in primary school, one is in high school. And she feels that they're settling into school nicely, but she's just really bored of being at home. And she picks up a part-time job. But she's noticed ever since that she's done that, her elder child, who's about 13, she's being a little bit angsty, a little bit rude. And sometimes when mum calls her to make sure that she's got home from school okay, the daughter doesn't pick up the phone and doesn't return the phone calls. Meanwhile, mum's getting on quite well, sister's getting on quite well at work, and she's been offered a promotion. What do you think she should do? There's no right or wrong per se. I want you to say, what do you think she should do and why? So you've got a mum, she's got two children, they're going to school, she's picked up a part-time job, and ever since doing that, she's noticed that her elder daughter is getting a little bit rude, a little bit angsty, and now she's been offered a promotion. Okay, so decline because her children needs attention. Her priority is her children. Very good. Let me ask another question. Why do you think this sister started working? Why do we think she started? Why did she get a part-time job in the first place? She had free time. Very good. Speak to her child, find out what's wrong. Yeah, she said that she was bored and that she had free time. Okay. I'm going to be very, very harsh and honest here. We need to differentiate between wants and needs. The sister says she's bored and that she might need some stimulation. And I'm going to put out the question, is there nothing she can do at home that would entertain her? Does it have to be a job that takes up time after the children come home from school? And honestly speaking, I want you to think about your life and the life of people you know. And honestly, to what extent is money a motivating factor? How often do we say that we are bored and we need to leave the house, but actually it's for the money so that we have more spending money? We have to be honest with ourselves. The reason why I chose this scenario, sisters, is to highlight something. And that is, sometimes with our brains are very, very tricky. We even trick ourselves, because sometimes we mix up our wants and our needs. We say we want mental stimulation, but actually we just want to be out of the house, or we want some spending money. We need to be genuine. We don't do it deliberately, but we need to take the time to really ask ourselves, why are we doing what we are doing? And then the question comes, you've got wants, needs, priorities. The priorities, having said that, maybe her decision was a necessity. Maybe she needs to put food on the table. Maybe she needs money to pay the bills. Or maybe her job is providing, what kind of job is this? Maybe she's providing an important service to the community. The real question is, why is she prioritizing work above her children? Maybe she has a reason for it, maybe she doesn't. But the thing that to note from this scenario is the fact that sometimes we say one thing and we mean another. Sometimes we say that we're bored, but actually there are other motivating factors behind our behavior. And really, I didn't bring this scenario here to vilify people who are working, but I want to ask a question that's very uncomfortable, which is, what are we prioritizing, and is it worth it? Because in your personal development, every action you do has an outcome. And if you want to change the outcome, you have to change the action. So earlier, we recognized that things don't just randomly happen. They are a result of our own hands and our own doing. The next step above that is realizing that if you want to change the end result, you have to change what you put in the first place. So in that scenario, if that sister wants to be closer to her child, then she needs to reconsider the action that put her in that situation in the first place. And that action was taking the job. And this applies all across the board. This applies to things related to the dunya, like academics, all the way through to your personal ibadah. If you can't wake up for Fajr, instead of lamenting and say, oh, I can't wake up for Fajr, I can never wake up, focus on your actions. Focus on your actions that you're doing that are leading to that. What time are you going to bed? Are you prioritizing Netflix? Are you prioritizing being on your phone? This is a very uncomfortable thing to do, to say to yourself and recognize that actually I prioritize watching YouTube videos over being able to wake up on time for Fajr. Or I prioritize what people think over Allah's command to wear hijab. That is a horrible, horrible thing to realize about oneself. And the reason why I bring it up is that horrible feeling, don't bury it away. Don't bury it away. The Prophet ﷺ said, verily, among the words people obtained from the prophets are this: if you feel no shame, do as you wish. If you have no shame, then do whatever. It's fine. Like, just do whatever if you've got no shame. If you think about your life and you think about the weaknesses that you have and you feel embarrassed that, really the reason I can't wake up for Fajr is because I'm prioritizing this other thing above it. And the reason why I'm not able to fulfill that command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is because I'm prioritizing this above it. And if you feel ashamed about that, then that's good. Hold on to that feeling and allow it to motivate you to make some change in your life. Okay. How do we know what we are prioritizing, whether we are prioritizing the right or the wrong thing? Firstly, this is wisdom that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is hikmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we have means to, learn these things like istikhara and, seeking advice from righteous people. But on a personal level, we have to have a success metric. The same way that big companies audit their finances and they measure certain things, we need to be able to measure ourselves to see if we're prioritizing correctly. And actually, I want to share some verses from Surah Fajr because it highlights an interesting incident and we can learn a lot from it. So I'm just going to recite a passage and then inshallah we'll break it down and have a look at it. فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. Okay. Inshallah, let's look at these verses because it's very interesting. I'm going to paraphrase, but essentially, the nature of man is that when his Lord tries him, so trials you through honor and blessings, he says, my Lord has honored me. But when he tries him through restriction of his provision, he says, my Lord has humiliated me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the nature of man, that when we are given blessings, we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honoring us, even though those blessings are actually a trial for us. And when we are restricted of our provisions, so when we are trialed in that way, we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is humiliating us. No, indeed, you do not honor orphans, do not urge one another to feed the poor, you consume inheritance greedily, and you love wealth with a passion. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that actually we have misunderstood the nature of these blessings and these trials. And then he goes on to say that we have a deep love of wealth. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts describing the end of time, like Yawm al-Qiyamah. No, indeed, when the earth is pounded to dust, pounded and pounded, when your Lord comes with the angels rank upon rank, when hell that day is brought near, on the day man will take heed, but what good will that be to him then? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets the scene. And this is the bit I want to hone in on. He will say, so this is what man will say, would that I had provided for this life to come. So this is the wrong metric of success, sisters. We think that honor, we think that wealth is a metric of success, that someone has a lot of status and someone that has a nice house. It's not a metric of success. And on top of that, in this verse of Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it as wealth that's basically usurped. It's acquired by usurping the rights of others. So if your home, your positions at work are from usurping the rights of others, then that's definitely not from success. If your children, it carries on, sisters, think about the basic principle of this. If you or your children, you have degrees that you acquired whilst doing haram, and you continue to use them to do haram, those degrees are useless. They're worse than useless because you'll be held to account about them. If you're going to university and you're doing things that are haram there, what good is that degree to you? And this is the metric of success. Right here, when that person says, I wish that I had provided something for this day, people will literally be saying, I wish I had provided for this life to come. That is your metric of success. That is how you determine whether you're prioritizing the right things or the wrong things. That is what you look at when you audit yourself. You ask yourself, what have I sent forward? What have I sent forward? What am I doing in this life that actually has meaning, that's going forward and will do something for me on the day that I need it the most? Sisters, I want us to watch a video. It's called the marshmallow test. I'll pop it on the screen and I'm going to just talk through it. And it's very important because it teaches a very basic principle. They did an experiment. They had some children and they put a marshmallow in front of the children. And they said, if you don't eat this marshmallow right now, I'm going to come back and I'll give you 2 marshmallows. So you can see they're putting the marshmallow in front of the children and they've left the room and they've told the children not to eat it. If you don't eat it, then I'll give you 2 marshmallows. And you can see them all staring at those marshmallows. What they realized from this experiment is that children who didn't eat the marshmallow, so children who were able to wait, who had delayed gratification, as they say, they were more successful in life. And so, sisters, when it comes to the dunya, when it comes to the akhirah, both of these things, our actions need to be focused on the long term if you want to achieve success. So inshallah, we'll move on and we'll ask the question, a very important question. How do we develop self-control? You know, if this experiment shows that self-restraint is how we attain success, then how do we develop self-control? Number one, sisters, begin to think long-term. Where is this action going to take me in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years' time? Where is this action going to take me after I die? Think long-term. That mindset will prevent you from prioritizing short-term pleasure over long-term detriment. You can take a physical example, like a non-religious example, just physically. If you prioritize eating junk food, the joys of eating junk food over your long-term health, then it's fine as a one-off. But in the long term, what is it going to do to you? And if you prioritize the short-term joy of having a little bit more spending money by taking up, you know, a random job at a time when your children need you, what is that? What's the long-term effect going to be on your children's tarbiyah? Think long-term. Every action you do has a consequence. And the second thing is moderation mindset. What do I mean by this? We'll discuss it in physical terms, and then I'll explain it in sort of a spiritual term. Generally speaking, being moderate in terms of your physical health is a good thing. Because when we overconsume, when we eat too much, for example, we end up with self-inflicted illnesses. I'll give you an example right off the bat. For example, diabetes. You know, the type 2 diabetes is largely preventable, sisters. I mean, a lot of the time you'll go to the GP, they'll tell you your sugar's high, they'll tell you to lose weight and to eat properly before they even put you on medications. They literally give you a chance to reverse it. Your actions have consequences. We choose not to. There's so many people who can't fast Ramadan. Because of what? Because they overate 10, 15 years ago and they've ended up with this illness. There are people who can't stand in Taraweeh due to things that they inflicted upon themselves in terms of poor decisions, in terms of what they're eating. You know, there are people who need to be wheeled around the Kaaba to make tawaf. There are people amongst us who can't make sujood anymore. And yes, subhanAllah, there are legitimate reasons for this. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant everyone shifa, ameen. But the self-inflicted things, sisters, the things we do to our own selves by making poor food choices. You know, a person, you know, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he saw a man with a big stomach and he asked him, what's this? And the man replied, a blessing from Allah. And Umar radiyallahu anhu replied, rather a punishment. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a human being fills no vessel worse than his stomach. This is the effects of physical overconsumption, of physically overeating or taking on too much. Sisters, what do you think that mental overconsumption does to our spirituality? And that leads us to today's title, which was Gobbling Up Progress. We eat away at our spiritual growth by lack of moderation. So we can't move forward and become better people when we're over-consuming in other parts of our life. So what do I mean by that? I mean when we physically over-consume, when we over-purchase, when we're obsessed with here and now, when we're so engrossed in the dunya that we forget everything and everyone else, we're jumping from one holiday to the next. Sisters, we're celebrating things that we're not even supposed to celebrate. We're celebrating every single person's birthday in the house. We're celebrating Easter for some reason, Christmas, New Year's. We don't give ourselves the mental space to improve. We don't give ourselves the mental space to improve. I'm going to pop up a picture on the screen. Does anyone, let's start easy. What is this? Just generally, what's on the screen? Say what you see. I'll pop it in the chat box, inshallah. What can you see? What is it? Is it a mountain? It's not a mountain, is it? What is it? There's two pictures, but it's roughly the same thing. Okay, I see we're all shy. It's a beach, right? It's a beach. It's like the seaside. I'm going to ask, so this is a seaside essentially, and this is sort of like a holiday resort. That was the easy question. The harder question is, does anyone know where it is? If I tell you, sisters, that this is in Jordan, can anyone tell me what this sea is? What's the name of this sea? This is in Jordan. It's a resort in Jordan, and this is the sea. Does anyone know what the name of the sea is? Okay, that's fine. Don't worry. It's a hard question. This is the Dead Sea in Jordan, and this is a holiday resort. Sisters, we are so caught up in our seeking our own pleasure and jumping from thing to thing that we are doing things that are utterly beyond the limits. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not enter upon these people who are being punished unless you are weeping. If you are not weeping, then do not enter upon them, lest before you like what befell them. So for context, this is the area where the people of Lut were destroyed, essentially. And this hadith is about the people of Thamud, but it can be applied generally. And specifically to this area, in terms of the Dead Sea, we have Ibn Qayyim's statement that whoever passes through these dwellings, they should know that Allah was angry and people were punished here. And these people, if you're passing through, you shouldn't really pass through. You shouldn't stay there, and you should move on quickly, and you should cover your head with a garment, and you should move quickly, and you should be weeping and crying, and you should learn a lesson by what has happened to them. And subhanallah, we have taken these places as resorts, as holiday resorts. We are so obsessed with joy and the pursuit of happiness that we forget the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sisters, if we truly want to invest in the hereafter, we have to have some level of discipline and some level of moderation in the dunya. We have to not be touching the boundary walls of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kingdom. Moderation is all about satisfaction. It's about being full. This is something that we need to learn ourselves. This is something that we need to teach our children as well. We do a huge disservice to our children when we teach them about money and we give them pocket money. And, why does a 6-year-old need to know the value of money? What a 6-year-old needs to know is the beauty and the sweetness in doing something for someone else and seeking the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This greed that we have in ourselves, where we are looking at the plates of others, literally looking at the plates of others at parties, seeing what other people are eating, but also figuratively, we are looking at other people's homes, people's lifestyles, people's clothes. SubhanAllah, sisters, our risk is written for us and their risk is written for them. Nobody's going to take yours and you can't take theirs. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that if the son of Adam had a valley full of gold, he would like to have 2 valleys. And nothing fills the mouth except the dust of the grave, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives him who repents to him. The reason why I'm bringing this up, sisters, is because we need to ask ourselves, what is on my mountain? This valley, this mountain of gold, what is it? Because we're all different. We all have our shortcomings. We need to ask ourselves, what is it that I'm trying to fill my life with and I'm still not satisfied? And to be honest, I'm never going to be satisfied. What is it? For some people, it's houses and plots of land. For other people, it's gold. For other people, it's food. And for other people, it's status. What are we dedicating our lives to? What are we in the pursuit of? What are we trying to get that we will never be satisfied with in this world? Remember, the end of the hadith is, and Allah forgives him who repents to him. So we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives us for what we've done and what we've pursued in heedlessness and ignorance. And subhanAllah, we are coming to the end now of Personal Development Week, and I want to give you glad tidings. Like the Prophet ﷺ said, to give glad tidings to the strangers. Because inshallah, as you change the direction of your life, you will become a stranger. You're going to have to stand alone in your own homes and amongst your extended family and amongst your friends. We learn this in Surah Tahrim, where it says in the Quran, Allah presents an example of those who disbelieved, the wife of Nuh and the wife of Lut. They were under two of our righteous servants, but they betrayed them. But they betrayed them. Sometimes you have to stand alone. Sometimes the people in your home will not stand with you. We have gone through this whole week and we have spoken about personal development. And in today's session, we have spoken about some very uncomfortable topics. But one of the things we need to realize is you will become a stranger as you do this. And that doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. When one person goes to change their lives, everyone around you, your friends, everyone is going to be thinking, what are you doing? You weren't like this before. But that doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong. And that loneliness that you feel, it will subside. And the difficult moments will be followed by ease. And in the end, sisters, the one who has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is never truly alone. So we spoke about actions leading to outcomes. We spoke about needs, wants, and priorities. We've spoken about self-discipline, moderation, and satisfaction. And we've spoken about success. That success is what you invest in the hereafter. And I want everyone to reflect on these things. And in the next few days, because now we've concluded our week on personal development, in the next few days, set yourself some targets that are long term, or at least reflect on the direction that you are going. Are you happy? Do you think that the way you are going is the way that righteous people go? Do you think the way that you are going will lead to a good end? That's what I want everyone to do, inshallah. Next week, we're looking at family development, and I would highly recommend that everyone attends these sessions, simply because the things we're talking about don't often get talked about, and I know that there are many people suffering in silence. We will be talking, inshallah, about poor spousal relationships. We will be talking about children who are estranged, children who do not speak to their parents at all anymore, what to do in those sorts of situations. We're talking about toxic relationships. We're talking about things that are an unfortunate reality in our communities at the moment, and inshallah we'll have Q&A as well, so you'll be able to ask any questions. But alhamdulillah, we've completed our first week looking at personal development. Jazakallah khair. I'm happy to take any questions. If anyone has any questions, you can pop them in the chat box. Otherwise, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for us to implement this change, Ameen, into our lives. Ameen.
Dr. Batul, we do have some questions. Sister Tahira has asked, regarding not visiting Jordan, what other places should we not visit?
In general, from what I have understood, is that it's places that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, destroyed nations. So I don't know specifically of other places. There may well be some, but in terms of visiting Jordan, it's not a point blank, you can't visit Jordan at all. It's just the Dead Sea, or these areas that we know specifically where these things have happened and nations have been destroyed.
Jazakallah.
So
and also there were so many sisters who had actually said Dead Sea, but I guess, we were, discussing the topic. Alhamdulillah.
Yes, subhanAllah. I just scrolled down and I saw everyone has said the Dead Sea. So I apologize, sisters. You did very well, mashallah.
Okay, are there any other questions? I'm just trying to look. Is the link to this?
So in terms of the schedule, because I feel like a few sisters are asking, the link is the same. The timing is the same as well. and we do Monday to Thursday. So inshallah, tomorrow there isn't a session, but from Monday we're starting again, and we have a whole host of very, very good, mashallah, external speakers coming to speak, and some internal speakers as well. Okay, I don't think there's any further questions for myself. So inshallah, Sister Rim, I'll pass back to you. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Batul. Mashallah, that was a very, very brilliant session. Very insightful, thought-provoking, lot of contribution from the participants on your topic. Very enriched experience right now, subhanallah. Yeah, so there are a lot of sisters asking about the talk. So this is for the whole month in Ramadan, Monday to Thursday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we would not be having any sessions. However, you can look out for your local centers because UK Islamic Mission is all over UK, and you can look out for these centers locally and go visit them, find out. Also, we do have, the social media pages, which I can talk about in a bit. You could also log in there and check out, what other sessions are going on. Right. So for now, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Batul. And to conclude, let's reflect on the lessons that we can draw from today's session. So we as Muslims need to have a very balanced approach. Subhanallah. We need to also understand priorities. The fiqh of priorities is in itself a large field of study in Islam. It is important that every person grasps enough of this concept to be able to recognize their priorities in their time and concerns. Imam al-Ghazali said, disregarding the prioritization of good deeds in itself is a bad deed. So if you can't prioritize your, like you can't prioritize whether you should give time to your children or job or money. So if you can't prioritize that, then this would mean that it's a bad deed in itself. So you need to understand for your own self, you go back into your own life and start pondering, reflecting about your life and see what changes can you make, what are you prioritizing. Sometimes we may think that this is correct for us and this is a right way of prioritizing, but the only correct way of prioritizing is what is correct in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If something is not aligned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that means that's not the right priority. Right. And I've also got some points jotted down from today's talk. Be concerned about yourself. I really love that because we often forget that we need to be concerned about ourselves. We often look into, oh, so-and-so did this to me, so-and-so did that to me. But Allah won't ask us about that. Allah won't ask us what people did to us. Allah will ask us about what did we do. So we should be more worried about our own acts, our actions, our deeds, our intentions, and try to fix those. Because end of the day, you won't be responsible for anybody else. You would be responsible for yourself. Reevaluate yourself. And we as human beings are really like, we could get greedy. So if you have one mountain of gold, you would want next minute the second mountain of gold. So try to look out for the things that are beneficial in both worlds. So don't limit yourself, like for now, like Dr. Batul said, look at the long-term goal. So if you're really asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, then make sure that whatever you're asking for, it should not just limit you to this world, but it should also benefit you for the next. And also, my dear audience, maybe, instill these values in your children from this age, from a very, very young age, because they are vulnerable at that age, and they might get misled. So if you instill values, you would see that when they grow up, they are leading examples, inshallah. And yeah, and if you want to change a certain outcome, change what you put in. I love that, because certainly your situation is not going to change if you're going to put in the same thing again and again and again. So there's certainly, you need to change something that you put in order to get something different. So for example, Fajr, if you can't wake up, then what do? Maybe go to sleep early, put an alarm, ask your family to help you with it. Ask your friends, your close community, that give me a call, give me a message. And then, make dua to Allah, but not just dua, but also making sure you have put something in place for that to happen. So it's like a holistic view that we take on it, that it should be your heart, your mind, your soul, your limbs, everything. Yes? Subhanallah. Yeah, so that is the conclusion for today's talk. Moving on from there, please remember to connect with us on our social media platforms, inshallah. We maintain several pages, and we kindly ask you to like and subscribe to stay informed about our ongoing program throughout the year. Jazakallah khair, dear speaker. Jazakallah khair, all attendees, for taking time out and attending today's session, as well as for their participation in answering questions, as this wouldn't be possible without your help. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all the sisters in abundance for their time in Allah's way. We all thank all the UK Islamic Mission volunteers, as well as the platform that we can hold such programs. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He made us all come together and bring about this beautiful gathering for this whole week. And this was towards personal development, which we've finished. And next week, we will be focusing on another segment. So stay tuned for all of next week. And the whole of Ramadan, inshallah, Monday to Thursday. I'll quickly make some du'as. Please join me in making these du'as. O Allah, make us faithful unto you and make us obedient unto you. O Allah, make us follow the footsteps of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, forgive all our shortcomings and make all Muslims pious. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, enhance Islam and make easy all our difficulties. O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give us the willingness to follow the path which will gain us your pleasure, and not the path which will cause your displeasure. O Allah, you are the converter of hearts, so convert our hearts towards you. O Allah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, make us spend our time and effort in the service of thy religion. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, illa allazina amanu wa amilu solihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadi wa ala ali Muhammad. Kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadi wa ala ali Muhammad. Kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We do have the link here, sisters. I know we did have some issues today, technical issues, but on the chat box, you can see this link, and please feel free to take on that link. And Jazakallah khair, everyone.